A big question people are asking is Bitcoin's 4-year cycle over? It's a hard question because we don't have any real data to actually base this on. I do believe that it is going to be disrupted for the next cycle, maybe, but may not be quite over yet. Because remember, you still have the halving once every 4 years. But now for the next 4 years, you've got this ETF with flux money coming in. Now, remember yesterday in my video, if you haven't seen it, go watch that, that like analysts are saying there's going to be $1 trillion coming in to Bitcoin, over the next so many years. And that $1 trillion is going to buffer Bitcoin to very huge heights. And it's going to come in over a long period of time because not everyone's going to buy everything at once. And even if you have a trillion over 10 years, it's basically 100 billion a year or about 300 million per day. And that's consistent buying up. So, like the next bear cycle for Bitcoin might actually be alleviated by these buys. Now, you have to remember people can short ETFs. And market traders, if they can short it, they will short it. So it's still going to have that kind of effect. But just the fact that people do know that there's a huge amount of money expected to come into Bitcoin, and there's not really a huge selling valve out there because, like FTX, Grayscale, they're not going to happen every day. Essentially, once those companies are flushed out, I think they've mainly been flushed out at this point. Maybe there's like Celsius 3AC or something, but it's going to take like a year or two at the most to flush them out. That's more than just buying pressure. And the people that are buying the ETFs, which make the company buy the ETFs, and plus all the other institutions that are just waiting to get in right now for the paperwork to come through, they're not going to wait until Bitcoin dumps to like 20K or something to buy in. They're just going to buy in whenever they feel like, if Bitcoin's going to be higher in the future. And right now, everyone is feeling like Bitcoin will be higher in the future. So for the next couple of years, there's going to be like consistent buying pressure at least, and probably increasing buying pressure. So when the market is supposed to go down in late 2025 or early 2026, it may not go down as much, or it might not go down at all. It might just be even. And I think that will throttle expectations for the next bear market. And I do think that kind of steady buying pressure can actually last 3 or 4 years. Because remember, $1 trillion is 100 billion over 10 years. They're not going to all buy at the beginning. And more people are going to be getting into the market. Also, more and more funds are going to be getting into the market as Bitcoin becomes more of like a word of mouth or as more common in the investing world. I think ETFs give Bitcoin that legitimacy to achieve kind of that status. And as the years goes on, more and more funds will flow into Bitcoin because people are going to be less and less afraid of it as like other people come into it are like, okay, there's, BlackRock, Fidelity, like X fund is part of it. So we shouldn't really be afraid to invest in this asset. So I do think like the next couple of years are going to be kind of like a snowball rolling downhill, and it's just going to gradually get bigger and bigger. And that I think will break the back of the bear market in the next cycle. But, in 4 more years, we're talking like next cycle is 2028, and then like 2032, that cycle might actually revert back to the 4-year cycle because we still have the halving, and that is a cut in supply each time. Now, by that time, I expect that most of the buying from funds, at least the huge inflow, will pretty much be over at that time. There's probably going to be still some scattered buys here and there, but I'm going to assume most of the fund buying at that time is probably going to be over. And because most of that buying is actually going to be over, I think things will revert a little bit back to normal, where like the inflows of people buying and outflows of people selling will be much more normal after a couple of years. Now it might break it for 2 cycles because there's supposed to be like a lot more money coming in, and you have to remember like the altcoins, like there's going to be altcoin ETFs at that time too. We're talking like 5, 6, 7 years down the road, not next year or the year afterwards. So the impact on Bitcoin might be the biggest in the next bear cycle when it's still the only ETF or one of the few ETFs on the table. So what I think is like the 4-year cycle in the long term will continue, but in the next cycle, we might not have that much of a bear market, or a much smaller bear market. Like if we go up to 150, we might only go down to like 80 or so. And even though that sounds like a huge way down, it's way better than what we had in the last couple of bull runs, especially as institutions are coming in, because as people short it, they're also going to long it. Obviously, the only thing that can basically table all this is we have a huge economic fallout, which I personally do not think we will actually have anytime soon. But that's essentially what you are hoping for if you're betting on that cycle, which I don't think will actually continue for the next couple of years. But after the next cycle gets over, when we get to the next cycle and like the inflows and outflows basically get a little bit more even, I think we'll go back to that 4-year cycle, because it is kind of psychologically baked in. And more than just being psychologically baked in, there is that definite having force behind it, where it's cutting the supply in half. And of course, all economies have bull and bear cycles, but the stock market doesn't have like a 4-year halving type of thing. So I do think we'll kind of settle into the 4-year cycle, maybe by more like the end of this decade rather than the cycle coming up. And but for altcoins, we might just continue the 4-year cycle, because the ETF money does not come into altcoins. And like if Bitcoin dumps 50% or like 40%, altcoins can dump 80, 70, 80%, or possibly even more, especially because there is not that ETF holding the altcoins up. So like I think this time, like when you think the bear cycle is here, you definitely want to consider putting your money in Bitcoin out from those altcoins, and especially the meme coins. You need to be out of the meme coins before the bear cycle comes, because the bear cycle, I think, is going to smack meme coins really hard, but might not smack Bitcoin that hard. It's going to smack other alts as well, unless there's like an Ethereum ETF by that time. Then Ethereum might not get smacked that hard. There's a lot of regulatory uncertainty about other coins though, so we don't really know which coins will actually get an ETF. Bitcoin is probably going to be the only ETF around, probably for like a year or two at this point, because I don't think the ETF for Ethereum is getting passed. I really hope it does. And even if the Ethereum one gets passed, I think they're going to be the only two for the next year or two, because no one even has a futures ETF, and you need to get one of those first before you qualify for a spot ETF. So that's what I'm thinking right now. The 4-year cycle might be broken for one cycle, maybe two, but then it will continue. But most of you probably in crypto aren't thinking about 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 years down the line, probably thinking about the next 2 years. So maybe not that big of a bear for the Bitcoin market, but definitely still a big bear for the altcoin market. But I do think this time, like the bull run will be bigger than 2021, but not quite as big as 2017, because 2017 was just nuts. That was like when everyone just kind of figured out what the hell Bitcoin was, didn't know about it, but kind of knew started figuring out what Bitcoin was, the ICO craze. Even with the ETFs coming in, I do not think we can beat that 2017 bull cycle, but I think it will be bigger than 2021. So there's my answer of whether the 4-year cycle is broken or not. So that's the news for today. Let me know what you think. Like and subscribe, hit that bell notifications button. Thank you and have a nice day.